A conservative-dominated Supreme Court yesterday dismissed the latest attempt by Republicans to eliminate Obamacare, leaving intact insurance coverage for 31 million Americans. By a vote of 7-2, with Justice Stephen Breyer writing for the majority, the case was dismissed on the procedural basis of lack of standing. The court held that a Texas-led coalition of GOP-controlled states and 2 individual plaintiffs had not suffered any injury and therefore had no right to bring suit. Trump appointees Brett Kavanaugh and Amy Coney Barrett voted in the majority on a ruling that leaves in place the entirety of the Affordable Care Act. Justices Samuel Alito and Neil Gorsuch dissented. So, Willie, big news from the Supreme Court this morning.
Especially when you look at that vote by Amy Coney Barrett. We heard from a lot of progressives and a lot of Democratic senators that she was on a mission to destroy the Affordable Care Act. Not the case yesterday, and not the first time that Trump-appointed justices have sided with the court's liberals. In 2018, Neil Gorsuch was the swing vote on a case about deporting undocumented immigrants for violent crimes, deciding the law was too vague. In 2019, Brett Kavanaugh surprised many when he sided with the court's liberals, ruling that iPhone users could pursue antitrust lawsuits against Apple over its App Store. Kavanaugh wrote the majority opinion in that case. And last year, it was Gorsuch again who joined liberal justices in a ruling that protected members of the LGBT community from workplace discrimination. So, Joe, we know that confirmation exercises are hyper-partisan circuses in many cases when we're looking at Supreme Court justices and Supreme Court nominees. But in this case, the central criticism of Amy Coney Barrett was that she was on a mission, to use the term, to destroy the Affordable Care Act. Yesterday, she voted to uphold it.
You know, there are a lot of things that are disturbing in American politics. The clown shows that these nomination battles have turned into through the years, and you know, on both sides. We could talk about what happened with Justice Kavanaugh. We can talk about what happened on the other side. We can go all the way back to Robert Bork. There's screeching and yelling and screaming on both sides, which are actually deeply offensive to people that actually follow the court and understand that sometimes it's not as cut and dry. And Willie, you can even look at the other case where the city of Philadelphia was sued over adoption and over whether same-sex partners could adopt children or not. Now, this is a case that could have ended up 5-4 if Amy Coney Barrett and Brett Kavanaugh had followed Alito's concurrence. And it was a red-hot concurrence that a lot of people on the right would have absolutely loved. I think it's extraordinarily telling that they chose instead on an issue that was going to be this divisive to side with John Roberts and still get to the proper outcome, perhaps a little less with less sharp edges, and have a unanimous 9-0 verdict. That says an awful lot about, at least in these cases so far, about Amy Coney Barrett, about Brett Kavanaugh, about John Roberts, and their understanding that the Supreme Court obviously, again, is, yes, it is a legal institution, but there certainly are political considerations as well.
Yeah, and in the case of the Affordable Care Act decision, it was a 7-2 vote. Only Gorsuch and Alito dissented in that opinion. Let's bring in Chief White House Correspondent for the New York Times, Peter Baker. Peter, good morning. So should we be surprised at the size of the vote, perhaps, the 7-2 vote on the Affordable Care Act decision here?
Well, on the one hand, yes, in the sense that we have begun, and especially in recent years, to think of the court in the same way we think of Congress. We think of it as just another political institution. The fact that we refer to it as a 6-3 court, as if it was just basically a mini legislative body with political parties, that's a relatively new phenomenon. We've seen over the years Republican appointees who turned out to be liberal and Democratic appointees who turned out to be somewhat more moderate or conservative than their presidents might have expected. But in recent years, we've seen a far more predictable set of opinions from justices depending on who they were appointed by. This reminds us that, in fact, that it's not a political body in the same way that Congress is, that there are, in fact, different equities as justices see them, and that they are willing to think outside of the ideological and partisan box at times. That doesn't mean that Amy Coney Barrett and Brett Kavanaugh are suddenly liberals. They're not. They're going to rule with the conservatives the vast majority of the time, but there will be moments when they see legal arguments that don't fit their view of the law. In this case, we're talking about, of course, not even getting to the merits of the case. We've got just talking about whether or not the case should have been brought in the first place. And they're saying, no, these guys don't have a reason to bring this case because they weren't harmed by anything. They don't have standing. That's the legal term. What's interesting is if you go back to the time when the Trump administration joined this case, some of his own lawyers told him not to. They told him this was a loser case, not because of the standing issue, actually, but because of the merits that the court didn't even get to. They think on the merits, the court would have ruled, some of them told Trump 9-0 against him because, in fact, the merits of the argument were actually law. The merits of the argument is that the law couldn't stand if you took out that tax penalty, right? If without the tax penalty that they had removed, as Stephen Colbert mentioned in 2017, that the rest of the law should fall because Congress wouldn't have intended the law to go forward without it. Well, in fact, Congress did vote on keeping the rest of the law, even as it got rid of that tax penalty. So the lawyers told Trump, there's no way you're going to win this argument. Don't go with it. He went with it anyway. And, of course, he did end up losing at the Supreme Court, not even on the merits, but not even getting to the merits because they talked about standing. So I think that it reminds us the Supreme Court is a little more unpredictable than we like to think of it, even though, of course, the ideologies are pretty strong among these justices.